And at number 10 is the Reverse Flash. Let's just get this one out of the way. We had to include Reverse Flash on our list because, for all intents and purposes, he's literally the opposite of the Flash, meaning he's of ill intent. There's been a few Reverse Flashes over the years, starting off with 1949's The Rival, who had recreated Jay Garrick's formula. After he was rejected from the scientific community, he turned to a life of crime, and shared his version of the formula with other criminals. It only gets worse from there with the later Reverse Flashes, especially Eobard Thawne, who first appeared in 1963 with the alias of the Reverse Flash, who used his genius-level intellect and newfound powers to go on a crime spree. He soon became obsessed with replacing Barry Allen, utilizing time travel to mess things up for the Scarlet Speedster. Up next, number 9 is the Bizarro Flash, post-crisis. Created by Bizarro via his duplicator eye-ray power, kinda crazy but more on that in a sec, this Bizarro Flash is actually the third Flash in DC history that was part of the Bizarro family. The first was in 1967's Lois Lane number 74, and was fairly harmless. The second was in All-Star Superman, and aided the Man of Steel, despite being the slowest man on Earth. But the modern age Bizarro Flash is a tad more nefarious, or rather gluttonous. So that duplicator ray that shoots out of Bizarro's eyes, it was capable of duplicating anyone that Bizarro had encountered, including the Flash and the rest of the Justice League. This Flash is a sad version of the man he was crafted after, morbidly obese, constantly eating, and ultimately very slow. He even has a mustard stain as his logo instead of a lightning bolt. Up next, number 8 is the Whizzer. There's two characters who went under the alias of the Whizzer, one of which is an homage to the Flash and part of a group called the Squadron Sinister. They were part of an unofficial JLA Avengers crossover. Essentially, the Squadron were a parody of characters from DC's Justice League, the Whizzer being the parody of the Flash. The character would later be renamed to Speed Demon, starting off as a villain for Spider-Man when he reappeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 222 in 1981. Up next, number 7 is No Rules to Follow. In Justice League International's 5th annual 1994 issue, there was a storyline called No Rules to Follow, and it featured a world that despised those with superpowers. This caused 10 metahumans to band together, and show the world that their powers could be used for good, which sort of backfired, since 5 of them went a little rogue, including the Flash. After trying to contain a nuclear meltdown, the heroes only made things worse, and the Flash and co. decided to start raiding military installations that previously hunted down their kind. Up next, number 6 is Surge. Also known as Luca Loletti, Surge was a member of the Hand of God, a superhero team with 5 members who worked out of the Vatican in order to protect the Catholic Church from superhuman threats. But Surge was corrupted eventually, and was paid to assassinate the Pope, which he succeeded in doing. But he was eventually brought to justice and killed by Midnighter. In our number 5 spot is Slipstream. Slipstream is a part of a group of villains who followed in the footsteps of the crime syndicate, but more on that group later. Slipstream, along with 6 other members of his evil team, were mistaken for heroes, and brought to Earth to participate in a charity event. They played along for a while until they began fighting the Justice League, but were ultimately defeated. Up next, number 4 is Johnny Quick from the Crime Syndicate. Getting back to the Crime Syndicate here, let's take a look at Johnny Quick of Earth 3, an antimatter Earth, who banded together with Owlman, Superwoman, Ultraman, and Power Ring, all alternates of Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Green Lantern. They used their powers for personal gain, committing crimes. Luckily, the character died during Crisis on Infinite Earths, almost 20 years after his initial debut. And at number 3 is Johnny Quick of the Crime Society. Not to be mistaken with our last number, the Crime Society also takes place on Earth 3, except in the 52 Multiverse. It's a world in which evil always triumphs over good, and the Crime Society are essentially the overlords of the planet. Johnny Quick is still the evil Flash. The Crime Society joins ranks with Monarch, and Quick fought against the Earth 2 Flash and the Tangent Flash during Countdown Arena, as well as participated in the invasion of Earth 51. While it's uncertain whether or not he died when Monarch's armor ruptured on Earth 51, annihilating everything, it's safe to say that it's likely since we haven't heard of the character since. Up next, number 2 is the Nazi Speedster from Earth 10. The Nazi Speedster of Earth 10 exists on a world in which Nazi Germany won the Second World War. He's part of the JL Axis, a group put together by Hitler composed of superpowered individuals, all working to serve his commands and dish out punishment to those who do not follow suit. The emblem on his chest contains 2 lightning bolts instead of 1, which are eerily resembling the SS logo of the paramilitary organization of Hitler's during that time. The SS in real life were largely responsible for the genocides that took place during the Holocaust. So yeah, safe to say this Flash is most definitely evil. And finally, in our number 1 spot is the Red Death. The newest addition to our list is perhaps one of the most dangerous villainous versions of the Flash to date. From the Dark Knight's Metal event that opened up with the introduction of 7 evil alternate versions of Batman, the Red Death comes from Earth -52 in the Dark Multiverse, a multiverse that exists underneath the main multiverse and is filled with evil. Red Death is the combination of Batman and the Flash, when Batman steals his Speed Force, merging the two together. With Batman's mind and the Flash's abilities, this makes the Red Death a vicious threat, especially when you consider the kinds of trouble he could whip up by utilizing the Speed Force. As of this recording, not much has been revealed about the Red Death, so here's hoping we get to see more of this villain and the challenges he'll pose to the heroes of the main multiverse.
Number 10. Abandon his daughter. Sort of. In the CW Arrowverse, Flash basically put his daughter in a tough spot where she wasn't allowed to return to 2019 and had to stay in the future, where she came from, the year 2049. Because she had betrayed Barry and Team Flash, he told her to never return to the year 2019 and warned her that if she did so, he would know, as he would sense her presence in the Speed Force. Wanting to see her father Barry Allen again, Nora decided she had no choice but to find another way to travel back undetected. This caused Nora West Allen to ask Thawne about how to use the negative Speed Force, something Barry couldn't sense. As a result, Nora would later decide to confront the consequences of her actions, dying in the process, instead of continuously being on the run for the rest of her life, because she had used the negative Speed Force so much. Unknowingly, the Flash here helped Nora to turn into a villain by rejecting her. Then there was the whole weird thing of how they ran into like an alternate Nora later on, and she was like, oh yeah, you guys used to tell me stories about this other version of me that you ran into that died, which is like kinda weird. It's kind of a weird story. Number 9. Killing Eobard Thawne. This is sort of a weird one, as although everyone seemed to feel that Barry Allen here was a villain, he was also just attempting to defend himself from a future that had come true before, and almost completely broken him. Barry Allen killed Eobard Thawne after Thawne made an appearance on his wedding day. Barry wasn't marrying Iris here, in fact Iris was no longer around, because before Thawne had actually killed her. Instead, he was marrying his current love, Fiona Webb, whom Thawne, when he showed up on their wedding day, attempted to kill. Fearing that Thawne would once again kill his romantic partner and still traumatized from when he'd likely killed Iris, Barry Allen killed Thawne before he could harm Fiona. However, because Thawne was killed by Barry, Barry ended up on trial, with even his nephew Wally West testifying against him, claiming that Barry had used basically an unwarranted amount of speed and force to stop Thawne. Speed Force, you might say. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more cool Flash lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Mass mind manipulation. Affecting what people know and don't know on a mass scale definitely feels like villain territory, and this is exactly what Wally ended up doing after having one of the worst days of his life. We know it was one of the worst because his now gone Uncle Barry, also known as the Flash, came back just for it, and Barry had said that he would only reappear on the 3 worst days of Wally West's life, so this was definitely one of them. It was after Wally and Linda had lost their unborn children in a fight against Zoom. Believing it would be better for himself and Linda, and maybe even the whole world if no one knew of his secret identity as the Flash, Barry, along with his pal, the Spectre, who had also stopped by for a visit, decided to grant Wally's wish, and everyone was made to forget the truth of the Flash's identity. However, what Wally did not think to ask about, or maybe stipulate, was how this would affect him, as he himself, it turns out, also forgot, which not so great. This not only caused a lot more crime to come about, but also made things worse between him and Linda. Note to self, don't mess with the whole world's memories of me. Number 7. Trapping Zoom in his worst memory. And that previous point wasn't even the worst part of that story. Although making the whole world forget that Wally West was the Flash created a lot of problems, even worse, in my opinion, was what he did to Zoom in revenge for hurting Linda. The two had an epic fight while Linda was taken to the hospital, which spanned issues 199 and issue 200 of the series, that started way back in 1987. Volume 2, if you will. But even more shocking was the aftermath of that fight. Wally of course won the fight thanks to a speed boost from both Bart Allen and Jay Garrick, and to make sure Zoom couldn't strike back thereafter again, he trapped him in one of the worst moments of his life, which played on a loop. The time he had unwittingly sealed the fate of his father-in-law, causing his death and later causing him to lose the love of his life, Ashley. I feel like being stuck in the worst moment of your life forever, that's a pretty bad punishment, I'm just saying. I mean, I don't think it ended up actually being forever because comics, but that's pretty bad. Number 6. Punishing Inertia. After Wally West learned of Bart Allen's death, he considered punishing Inertia for it by killing him, but then he ultimately decided on a worse punishment for the villain. A worse punishment than death. Wow. A punishment that sounds like something thought up by a supervillain, truth be told. Granted, Wally was hurting at the time, but at the end of the day, he's still a hero, and this punishment ultimately sounds like something that was cooked up by a great speed-based supervillain. Wally used his powers to slow Inertia down down to the point that he became virtually a living statue, unable to move but still able to hear and see in real time, experiencing the world around but living in ultra slow motion physically. Each blink of his eyes supposedly would take 100 years. Wally then placed this living statue version of the villain in the Flash Museum, facing an actual statue of Bart Allen, forcing Inertia to gaze endlessly at the ghost of a man he could never be. Sounds like a horror story. Sounds awful. Number 5. Flashpoint. Unintentionally, Barry Allen ended up as the villain of his own story and the villain of basically the entire universe when he selfishly used his powers to travel back in time to save his mother. Doing this completely altered the timeline and the future for many heroes and characters in the world. After learning of just how much of an issue this had caused and how he was solely responsible for the reshaping of the world, from villain Eobard Thawne no less, what a way to find out, Barry Allen realized that in order to fix everything, he'd have to dip back into the time stream and stop his past self from going back in time to save his mother. Even then, it's implied that Flashpoint was the main cause for the multiverse being permanently altered, and Barry Allen himself became one of the people responsible for the existence of the new continuity and reboot known as Prime Earth and the New 52. Number 4. Became the new Black Flash. The Black Flash is a version of Death in the comics, a very specific version of Death. The Black Flash is said to be the version of Death who comes for speedsters when it is their time to pass on. Often, the Black Flash has been seen as a villain in the comics, even though really when you think about it, death is kind of just a part of life and is a concept, so it's not really inherently evil when you think about it that way. Still, from the perspective of those who are being chased down, the Black Flash is a villain, which is why it was so crazy when after the Black Flash died, there was a time when Barry Allen had to take over, becoming the new Black Flash temporarily. Number 3. Heroes in Crisis. One of the worst times where we saw the Flash become a villain took place during Heroes in Crisis, which ultimately was a pretty interesting and suspenseful murder mystery story that also dealt with the consequences of being a hero from a mental health standpoint. So overall, this was a cool story, but it was also kind of awful in what it did to Wally. Something that most fans weren't too hot on was the big reveal of this story. A mass murder happened at the Sanctuary, killing many of the heroes who came there to take refuge and seek therapeutic help for trauma suffered both on duty as a hero and outside of that life. Initially, we were led to believe that either Booster Gold or Harley Quinn was possibly responsible, but later on it was revealed that an out-of-control Wally West was actually to blame. We had just gotten Wally back at this point, so many fans were disappointed to see him so quickly and intensely vilified, especially considering even though Wally was really to blame, it wasn't entirely his fault. He lost control of the Speed Force as a result of confronting his own trauma and his paranoia regarding the judgment surrounding said trauma while at Sanctuary. He was assuming that Sanctuary was made by the other heroes purely out of pity for him, because Wally was kind of crazy at the time after having the new reboot come about. Wally decided to break into the files and find out for himself if his suspicions were true. Then he learned that he was in fact wrong and basically became overwhelmed by the countless sessions with other heroes where they discussed their own intense and personal traumas, causing him to lose control. So of course, none of the killings had really been intentional. So it was a really tragic story. Number 2. Becomes Famine. During the events of DC's Future State, we learned exactly what the future holds for Wally. And yeah, it's not good. While we might be enjoying the Flash series now, where Wally is back and most certainly not a villain, it turns out that his destiny is once again to become one of DC's most powerful and tragic supervillains. This time though, it really seems as though it was not poor Wally's fault. Is it ever his fault? I mean, his punishment of other villains is his fault, but this is so unfortunate. In Future State, Wally ends up becoming possessed by the evil entity known as Famine, becoming one of what appear to be the apocalyptic Four Horsemen. Number 1. Attack on the Teen Titans Academy. One of the atrocities that Wally committed as one of the Four Riders as Famine was that he killed a ton of faculty and students over at the Teen Titans Academy. We see this all go down in a flashback in Future State after the mysterious student Red X seemingly unleashes them on the world. Near the beginning of the first issue for Future State Teen Titans, and in a few panels in that second issue, we get to see just how many people died in this attack on the Academy, and the death toll seems to be pretty substantial. Among the fallen are fellow Titan Donna Troy and youngster Wallace West. That's right, Wally as Famine killed his own family member. It's Flashes killing other baby Flashes, you know what I mean?
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Heatwave. This Flash villain made his first debut back in the Flash issue 140. He's standing on the cover with another popular villain, which of course I'll mention later on in this list. But Heatwave, aka Mick Rory, was one of those kids who was obsessed with fire. We always had that one kid who was playing with a lighter. Just trouble. Stay away from those kids, always. Absolutely trouble. He was a pyromaniac, and his entire history with schools and his family and everybody that's close to him, it's so dark. He burns down everything. He is a maniac. He got a job as a fire eater in a circus, but of course this didn't last long because he set the circus on fire. That's just how extreme he is when it comes to these elements. In his first issue, his sights aren't even set on the Flash. He's actually battling Captain Cold, and the Flash is like, well, this both looks terrible, so I gotta stop both of these maniacs, I guess. He saw the rogues in action, and then he decided to suit up himself and join the bad guys officially. So he suited up and carried a handy flamethrower gun and took on the nickname Heatwave, appropriately so. He appears in the CW series The Flash, played by Dominic Purcell, and he didn't last too long in the Justice League Flashpoint Paradox animated film as well. But he's one of the rogues that attacked the Flash at the start of the movie, so he's pretty important, so I figured we start the list off with him. And before we continue on with this list of Flash supervillains, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it does wonders for our channel, it helps us out so much. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now let's get right back to the list. Number 9, Captain Cold. Another character alongside Heatwave in the Flash series actually ended up changing to the good side in CW's Legends of Tomorrow. But in the comics, he was just as much of a nuisance as Heatwave. Meet Leonard Snart, which is an amazing name, first of all. He made his debut in Showcase issue 8. So Leonard enjoyed the company of his grandfather, who ran an ice cream truck, but after his grandfather passed away, sadly, Leonard had to spend his days entirely with his father, who was in no means a good parent at all. So next he studied the energy emissions of his cyclotron and figured it could work against the Flash. So he designed a weapon that could freeze people using the moisture in the air. Now it sounds fatal, but he only takes his villainy ways to a certain point. He has the same rule as Batman, which means no. You know what I'm saying? So he's not the worst of the worst. I mean, he uses a cold gun to attack the Flash, and he's the leader of the rogues, so he's still pretty bad, but as far as villains go, he's not too crazy. But still, Captain Cold can also be seen in The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow, played by Wentworth Miller, so he's pretty relevant. Number 8, Mirror Master. The other guy standing alongside Heatwave was Mirror Master. Now, he made his first debut back in The Flash issue 105. Meet Samuel Scudder. He was a burglar, of course, who liked to use mirrors as a weapon. So already this guy sounds like a villain in the making, but it gets better. It gets so much better. So thankfully, due to some forensic science, he was put behind bars, but things just amplified in there for the worst. For some reason, they had this guy working shifts at the mirror factory in the prison, because you know how those are a thing. So when he goes to throw out a mirror, he realizes that this mirror showed him the foreman's face instead of his, which is pretty odd. Now this mirror would show an image for minutes longer, so he figured he would study this specific mirror and use it as a way to create more crazy mirrors with more crazy effects. Soon after, he developed a costume, deemed himself the Mirror Master, using mirrors to create duplicates of other people to commit these crimes. And then there was a second Mirror Master. There were 2. I mean, maybe there are probably 100 with all these damn mirrors. But we have Evan McCullough. He made his trippy debut in Animal Man issue 8. He began his career already an assassin, and then add a fancy mirror gun to the mix, and we have a guy that can travel through mirrors in the mirror dimension. So both of these guys, different versions, but both equally as wacky and pretty terrifying. Imagine a guy coming out of your mirror like, give me all your money. I'd faint. I'd definitely faint. The CW used Mirror Master Sam Scudder, who in the show was actually a rival to Leonard Snart. And they also used another Mirror Master as well, but this time it was Eva McCullough, and her alias was Mirror Monarch. All the mirrors, all the people. Number 7, Dr. Alchemy. Albert Desmond made his comic book debut in Showcase issue 13. Another villain that gets locked up by the Flash, and then they really start to get creative. So Albert found the Philosopher's Stone. So now he was a criminal who had the ability to change elements from one to another. So of course he used the stone to escape prison, and since it's comic books we're talking about here, he made a cool name for himself. Maybe one of the coolest in my opinion, Dr. Alchemy. But he has another side of him, literally. So he came out, he got good, and then he quit his life of crime that was unfolding. So he hid the stone, tucked it away, he didn't want any part of that anymore. He tried to move on, okay. Tried is the key word here. See, this stone can completely change elements, and also it can completely change people, sometimes for the worse. A new Dr. Alchemy popped up, and it was Albert's evil twin, which was a construct that the stone made itself. So they both shared a psychic link. How trippy is that? So he too joined the Rogues once he went back to his villain days. Number 6, Gorilla Grodd. In the Justice League, Barry Allen makes a reference to one of his skills being that of Gorilla Sign Language. And although we never saw him in the Snyder Cut or anything like that, Gorilla Grodd is one of Barry Allen's mightiest foes. Just by looking at him, you could probably guess that. He made his first appearance in The Flash issue 106 back in 1959. And the first time we see him, it's pretty obvious it's not your average gorilla. He's blasting thought waves at the Flash. Thought waves. So what's going on here? Why is a gorilla blasting thought waves? He's a gorilla who got phenomenal abilities after being exposed to a meteor that landed near his tribe. Now, he's a super strong gorilla that can control the minds of others, being animals or people. In the CW, this version of the character is a little bit different. He's just this smart gorilla that was experimented on by Star Labs, and they intended to use him as a weapon for the government, but obviously Grodd wasn't on board and busted out of there. Number 5, Abracadabra. Citizen Abra was a stage magician in the 64th century. Now, his stage name, of course, was very fitting to the role, Abracadabra. He was a magician in this time where science was so advanced that magic shows just weren't a thing anymore. You couldn't really fool somebody. They're like, hey, we all know technology and all these tricks. This isn't new. We figured this out. It's like if I were to pull an iPhone out in 1990 and be like, check out Angry Birds. It's like, cool, but we're gonna get that later. There was no tricking anybody with magic. They were almost too smart, some would say. Nobody wanted to go and pay and see old tricks. So he gained all this intelligence from the future and the new sciences that it had to offer, and then the dude went back to our time after stealing a time machine and became this advanced criminal magician. And in our era, the dude can really put on a show. Like, Chris Angel is basically this guy, no? Like, we're so close to a supervillain. He's basically a supervillain without powers. Yet. Number 4, Godspeed. August Hart, aka Godspeed, made his debut not too long ago in The Flash Rebirth Volume 2, Issue 1. Now, with a name like Godspeed, one can assume the powers in which they'll probably contain. He is truly amazing. He can separate speedsters from the Speed Force. Now, August Hart was also a detective, a former partner of Barry Allen's, actually. And then along comes a force storm in Central City, and all of a sudden you have these godlike powers. Pretty ideal powers for a hero and also a villain? Not cool. Okay, why the villain move though? How did he become a villain? Well, when August's brother was taken out by a criminal, he was released due to insubstantial evidence. So August decided to confront the Black Hole organization after they'd stolen property from Star Labs, and then he sees their symbol, the same one that was at his brother's crime scene. I mean, it's great that you're teaming up with the good guys, but if you're also becoming a villain at the same time and handling things your way, kind of defeats the purpose. I don't know. Come on, man. Number 3, Savitar. He's the primary villain in Season 3 of CW's The Flash. Savitar is a future alternate version of Barry Allen, and in the comics he made his first debut in The Flash Volume 2, Issue 108. He was a Cold War pilot for a third world nation, and his life was forever changed when he was testing a supersonic fighter jet, because while he was flying at these tremendous speeds, his jet was hit by lightning and he went down. And then he discovered just like that he had super speed, and then he took on the Hindu term for God of Motion, which translates to, you guessed it, Savitar. What makes him stand out against other speedsters is his Speed Force aura. So while he's whizzing past enemies, he's surrounded by this friction cushion, which makes for some pretty smooth sailing. Electrokinesis also helps. Yeah, super speed plus lightning fists equals one hell of a night. Number 2, Zoom. Hunter Zolomon is the second character to take on the Reverse Flash mantle. Now, it all began when he was injured in an attack from one of those villains I mentioned earlier, Gorilla Grodd. He was left in quite bad conditions. I mean, obviously, he was just attacked by Gorilla Grodd, the villain Gorilla. Like, I'm surprised he lived at all. He was paralyzed from the waist down, and he asked Wally West if he could use his cosmic treadmill and maybe, go back in time and prevent that horrible, life-altering event to take place. Just an idea. But it's not that easy when it comes to speed and time and the Speed Force, so Wally West sadly declined this offer. You can't risk the time stream, it's just not worth it in the grand scheme of things. But Hunter wasn't really asking now, was he? He broke into the museum and tried to use the treadmill, but this resulted in an explosion that shifted Hunter's speed trial. So now he has this ability where he can alter his own time frame, gaining that super speed goodness. So Zoom believed that Wally West declined to help him out because he never experienced loss. So Hunter took it upon himself to go and take out Linda Park, Wally's wife. Not good. So now we have a tragedy, but fear not, because our Barry Allen helped change the tides of time when he prevented her untimely departure. And in The Flash issue 200, Wally West uses his powers to freeze him and makes him repeat the worst day of his life over and over and over and over again. Now, this is why I want to be a speedster, this ability right here. I would love to just make everybody chill out in their favorite memory, especially this tender time in the world right now. Or if you're mean, I'll make you chill out in an embarrassing memory, just for a bit, just to kind of teach you a little lesson. And finally, number 1, we have the Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne. He made his debut in The Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him to be super smart and pretty handsome. But he lacked the social skills to make his parents truly proud, so they decided that another son would maybe be fitting. A new best friend, great idea, sure. I grew up with siblings, I can back this, let's do it. That son's name was Robin, and he spent so much time trying to keep an eye on young Robin and make his parents proud that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. So he studied it illegally. He was too busy playing babysitter, so he's like, okay, I'll get there eventually, I'll just do it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who was now an officer in the Science Police. How ironic. The Speedster is interesting, a little bit confusing, but definitely interesting. So a future version of Thawne traveled through time, prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. And then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, now at this point Thawne has trained his entire life for this moment, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. So a future version traveled and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation, and then next time around, no Drake, no problem. Now Thawne is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. This was the first Zoom that I mentioned earlier. Reverse Flash is responsible for the deaths of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life apart. He's kind of the worst.
Number 10. Speed Force Aura. Well, you may know that the Flash can move insanely fast, allowing him to do a wide variety of wacky things. To be honest, what many don't often seem to think about is just how he manages it. After all, traveling at the speeds at which Barry, Wally, or Bart travel at is a sure way to end up on fire in regards to how physics, well, should work. So how come that doesn't happen? It's just imagined away, right? Because it's a comic book? Well, yes and no. While comics don't often address this potential issue, the truth is there is an in-comic reason for how the Flash can manage to go so fast and still stay safe and, you know, not combust. The Speed Force protects those who are connected to it by creating a protective barrier around them. In other words, he's wearing an invisible speed shield at all times, which keeps him safe. You can't see it, but it's there. Number 9. Enhanced Intelligence. Not everything is best treated as a race, and yet for the Flash it's hard to not treat everything that way. This superhero is built for speed, from his toes right up to his brain. That's right, not only can he move fast, but he can also think super fast as well, making him quite the intellect and bringing a new meaning to the term fast thinker. Get it? When truly concentrating, his fast-acting brain can be used to almost give him future vision, allowing him to see multiple possibilities and imagine their outcomes in an instant. With a brain that fast, I've always been surprised that he hasn't quit the Force and tried to become an improviser instead. That'd be really useful if you were an improviser, thinking on your feet like that. Although it is obvious in the comics, based on some of the Flash's choices, that this isn't an ability he always utilizes. If it had been, Flashpoint probably never would have happened. Number 8. Speed Borrowing. Wait a minute, Amanda. Borrowing? Don't you mean stealing? And isn't that a villain ability? Well, yes and no. While Godspeed is a villain based solely around the ability to feed off another speedster's speed, the Flash has also revealed this to be a useful ability for the good guys. Wally West has used this ability before, and this ability doesn't have to harm those he borrows from either. Really, what is happening when the Flash absorbs another being's speed is he's simply taking in any kinetic energy that the target has built up, allowing the Flash's own stores to be overcharged and resulting in an even faster Flash momentarily. Let's take some of that speed and use it for this. You can build up more speed later. You're fine. Number 7. Phase through objects. The Flash can move through solid material. His speed abilities allow him to vibrate on a molecular level at a high enough rate and with enough control over his body that he can actually slide his molecules in between the space of other atoms. Atoms themselves are mostly thought to be empty space, and this is the fact that this ability is based on. Flash simply slides his atoms in between another object's atoms, phasing through it. The crazy thing is he can transfer his ability to another object. Barry Allen once used his phasing ability to save an entire plane and all of its passengers from a collision. Pretty impressive. Just phase everything. Phase this whole building. Number 6. Packs a punch. What you might be surprised by is how strong the Flash can be. Well, while moving fast, anyways. The Flash himself is not known for strength, but as physics teaches us, a fast-moving object hitting a slow-moving object can create a huge impact, though often it is the object moving fast that will feel it more. Look at something falling at a high velocity down to Earth. The ground isn't often the one that gets hurt, right? It's the object crashing into it that gets hurt. Or look at cars that have collided with trees. Most often the car is wrapped around an otherwise unchanged tree, especially if the tree is large and thereby more grounded and less likely to move. So running into a wall is usually not advised when it comes to basic physics. Unless you are the Flash, who can move so fast that he can apparently just run through a wall. In the episode Divided We Fall from the Justice League Unlimited animated series, Wally West's Flash shows us just how strong the Speed Force made him when he gained speed running around the world in order to smash into Lex Luthor and Brainiac, who emerged at the time. Smashing into them at top speed caused the deadly duo to separate, and ultimately ended up in them being defeated. Wally West almost phased away in that Speed Force, but people were like, nah, come back Wally, come on. Number 5. Fly. Sort of. More like fancy falling, really. Barry Allen can move his body and limbs so fast that he can create what are known as speed vortexes. These can be used to help direct and cushion his landing when falling from up high. And Barry can also use these speed vortexes to push objects. It's basically like a directional tornado. If you want to see him use it for fancy falling, feel free to check out The Flash Volume 4 issue 26, where he uses it after bailing out of an airplane. So wait, does this ability make Flash a low-key airbender? That's what I want to know. Like super low-key. We're not talking Aang levels, but pretty fancy still. Number 4. Lightning bolts. Well, you may think that the artists are just looking for something to symbolize the Flash's speed when they draw him with little crackles of electricity or lightning around him. The truth is, they are likely, well, they're just that, an artistic representation of the Speed Force. You're right. That's all there. However, in CW's The Flash, they translate to so much more and actually become another power that the Flash can harness and use. The Flash has been shown using this ability to revive teammates like a defibrillator, or more commonly to attack enemies with, evoking Zeus as he appears to just hurl lightning at those who would oppose him. This power has recently also appeared in the newest Flash volume, so it's no longer just fancy art, now it's a thing. The newer incarnation of Wally, who later got retconned into being Wallace West, a cousin to the original Wally West, appeared to have lightning powers as well. So ha! Now it is a comic book ability. I tricked you. You were tricked. Number 3. Give life meaning. So the anti-life equation was a big part of DC when Darkseid, who'd been searching for it, finally got his hands on the formula in the events of Final Crisis. The storyline saw the anti-life equation, which has the ability to basically zap the meaning out of life, broadcast across all of Earth, effectively enslaving everyone on the planet and depressing the heck out of them. What could possibly break this horrid mathematical spell? Why, a kiss from Barry Allen, of course. I'm not kidding. When the anti-life equation has hold over Iris West, Barry comes in and knocks it out of her with a simple, Speed Force fueled kiss. Because the Speed Force is also pure life energy, ergo the opposite of anti-life. Also, the anti-life equation is terrifying. Can we just talk about that? It's basically depression in math form. Why am I not surprised that it's in math form? Math always makes me depressed. Number 2. Time travel. During Flashpoint, we got to see just how powerful the Flash really is. In this story, Barry Allen goes so fast that he successfully goes back in time in an attempt to save his mother from being killed by the villain Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne. Of course, we don't discover that Barry did this till later, as he wakes up in a completely different timeline where he is depowered as a result and appears to be the only one aware of all that has just changed. Flashpoint also wasn't just the beginning of New 52, but can also be somewhat looked at as the event that was responsible for DC's rebirth as well. Barry Allen's ability to time travel as the Flash is just one of many reasons why the Flash is considered one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe. Real talk. He's the Doctor Who of the DC universe. Number 1. Speed Scouts. Bart Allen's Flash can produce duplicates of himself, that's right. So if you ever wish you could be in multiple places at once, what you could really just be wishing for is just that you were the Flash. These Speed Scouts or duplicates move forwards and backwards through time and are mentally linked to Bart. They are physical manifestations and as such can even interact with objects or people. Once they return, they can report back any findings to the original Bart. The dangerous thing though is because they are so linked to Bart, they can also negatively affect him as well, if they are harmed, even sending Bart Allen into a coma when one of his speed scouts was destroyed. So as powerful as this ability is, it also comes with some pretty high risks too, which is why you don't see Bart use it that often, though he started using it as impulses. He's been using it for a while. But then he was like, nah, too dangerous. I'm good.